Well, thanks for having me. And before I begin, I have to say a few things before I tell you about myself. I don't have all the answers to what I'm about to tell you about. I'm certainly not against being board certified, and I am not at all against keeping up to date. A little bit about me. I am 48 years old. I'm a practicing internist in Los Angeles. I'm board certified, I'm board recertified in internal medicine, and I have no intention of re-certifying. I first had to recertify when I was 40. These things happened to fall on the decade marks for me. And at the time in internal medicine, actually, can I get a show of hands how many people have to do this maintenance of certification? So, half-ish. Well, for internal medicine, it was at the time, 8 years ago, 5 self-evaluation modules which were to be submitted online and a secure examination. The 5 online modules were very difficult. They required a lot of looking up things. They really weren't clinically relevant. It was a lot like previous board examination questions when you're in your residency. And at that point, having been 10 years out, I'm not really adjusting ventilators and things of that nature. And it was just like, why am I doing this stuff? And when you submit the answers, for example, if there were 50 questions, and let's say I got 42 right, if you wanted the answers to the 8 questions that you missed, or an explanation rather for those answers, well, guess what? After spending several $1,000s to do this whole recertification process, I had to spend another $980 to join the American College of Physicians to get access to those 8 answers. So all of this started to, run around in my head, and I started to wonder, really, what's behind all of this? Why are we doing this? Why is there grandfathering? There's this line in the sand in internal medicine. Anyone who has completed their residency program after 1990 would have to do this, but everyone before wouldn't have to do it. It was very expensive. It was incredibly time-consuming, and in the end, like I said, it was utterly clinically irrelevant. So I did the 5 modules with a friend after work, before patients, in between patients on the weekend, and then we studied for the examination together. And as all of you know, there's 2 things to do when you prepare for an examination. There's reviewing the material, and then there's taking practice examinations, because you know how much test takers like to play, or test makers rather, like to play games with test takers. And so I took this examination, and for those of you that haven't done it, it's an offensive process where you walk into this examination center, which is nowhere near where you live. The stress of taking an exam 10 years later when you're already practicing medicine, and every patient realistically is a recertification exam. You have to remove your watch, your jewelry, your wallet, you're fingerprinted, you're photographed. You go take this computerized exam. The days of number 2 pencils and circling numbers and underlining or circling salient issues are long gone. Instead, you have one of these magic erasable boards with 2 Kleenexes, both of which you need to return at the end of the testing center. I watched as one of my friends who had blown his nose or cried, and I don't know what, was unfolding this thing to present it that he wasn't taking, hadn't written any exam questions down. I'm sure many of you heard how the American Board of Internal Medicine sued, I think it was like 90 or 89 doctors for discussing the examination questions online. Anyway, thankfully, I passed this horrible thing. I mean, it was very demeaning, being fingerprinted and photographed every time I walk into a room. I mean, my patients trust me to take care of them, and these people don't even trust me to take an examination. And really, the only thing missing from this thing was the orange jumpsuit and the shackles. So, thank you. So I was very upset about this whole thing afterwards, and I decided to put my thoughts down on paper, and I wrote what I like to call my 9-page manifesto of hate, which I then showed to several of my doctor friends, because I really was interested in submitting this to the New England Journal, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, anyone that would take a look at it. And my friends were like, "This is fantastic, Ron. You just have to get the anger out of it." And the problem is that the anger is intertwined with this issue, and I'm, as you can see, very passionate about this. Other things you should know about me: I'm your typical bread and butter practicing internist. Histories, physicals, pre-op, sick visits. I have no political agenda or aspirations. I'm not involved in the administration of my hospital. I just go to work, you know, and then when I'm done work, I try to live my life. But this issue really offends me and bothers me. And so I started to look at this 9-page manifesto of hate, and I realized, you know, I can't, I'm incapable of editing it further. So like every doctor who has to deal with this stuff and got upset about it, well, what do? You go back to work and you kind of put it aside, and this was more of an emotional therapeutic exercise, writing this manifesto. And so flash forward now to when I'm 45, and this is really the crux of how this all came to be and why I'm here. When I was 45, 3 years ago, I received on 3 consecutive days 3 emails. Day number 1 from the ABIM, a mass email to all their diplomats informing them how this recertification process, which I had gone through 5 years earlier, was now MOC, or maintenance of certification. And those 5 online modules, the secure examination, were just now part of it. Now there were practice improvement modules, peer evaluations, patient evaluations, and more cost, more time, and my blood started to boil again. Day 2, I got another email from the ABIM, and actually I should backtrack just for 1 second. When I was driving home from Pasadena, I live in Los Angeles, after the examination, I said, I'm never doing this process again, but I wonder, will they do 3 things? Will they ever tie this recertification, now maintenance of certification, MOC, into participation in insurance plans or reimbursements from insurance plans? Number 2, will hospitals somehow seize on this and you know, deny or allow hospital privileges? And number 3, and most importantly, will they somehow tie this into licensure? And these were things I had in the back of my head and wrote about in the manifesto. But the second day, I get this email again from the ABIM telling me now how they are going to be informing health plans about our participation and completion of MOC so we can get, and I quote, monetary rewards and recognition. So here already one of the 3 things that I was concerned about was already coming to life. And so at this point, you know, steam was coming out of my ears. I went home, very upset about all this, started talking to a couple of the doctors about it. Can you believe this? And the 3rd day from my hospital, I'm on the attending staff at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. I got a, you know, very benign email from the head of the Department of Medicine, and he sent it off to about 400 or 500 internists, pulmonologists, cardiologists, anything internal medicine related, gauging interest in having after-hour review courses or sessions for MOC. Let's get together in a room like this, let's go over the questions, and then when you go home, you can submit it on your own time. So I'm reading this thing and I'm thinking, oh, you know, on one hand, a group experience, less painful, but on the other hand, they were buying into it. It was another layer to this whole thing, and it was another cost. And you know, I went home and I pulled out the 9-page manifesto of hate. So by the next day, I got back to the office, and 2 physicians had replied all to this mass email sent by the director of the Department of Internal Medicine. And one of them wrote, fabulous idea, and the other one wrote, I think so too. And I know both of these physicians, and they're sort of political lapdogs of the hospital. And I thought, you know, I gotta reply all about this thing, but I knew nobody would read an angry 9-page letter. So I basically wrote 2 paragraphs, and I'm paraphrasing, but it was something like, fabulous idea, I completely disagree. I said, in these times of rising costs of running one's practice, diminishing reimbursements, and this is all pre-Obamacare, more and more potential government regulations, and now more and more board requirements. I think it's time we revisit this issue in its entirety. And I sent this to 500 doctors, and probably the biggest mistake they ever made was giving me access to that many doctors, because that's really how this whole thing got underway. And I am not exaggerating, within 15 minutes, I received no less than 100 replies, 100% of which were positive. From bravo, finally somebody with courage, can we sue, is there a petition, what can we do, on and on and on and on. But I also learned my first valuable lesson about us physicians, and that was the #1, disease affecting our profession, because all of these doctors only replied to me. And it showed me the cowardice of our profession. And the #2 disease, which we'll get into in a minute, is apathy. And these are two problems that we're having with fighting this, fighting many of the things and subjects that you guys have been talking about today. It's just, we all have lives, we're all very busy with our practices, and it's difficult to carve out time for something which I believe is very important. And politics aside, this issue, and only this issue that I'm talking about, really has nothing to do with politics. All doctors can agree that this is a complete waste of time. And this is nothing more than a money-making extortion racket by our boards. So I presented this stack of emails to the president of the Young Physicians Association in Los Angeles, who had primarily used the organization for minglers, networking. I'm a gynecologist, you're a dermatologist, let's meet and whatever. I said, why don't we have a talk about this? So it took a few months, and this was September of, I think, '09 at this point. And it took a few months. She connected me with a political lobbyist who was the head of the PR division of this Young Physicians group. And long story short, in December, we had a meeting about this, all at my expense. Another thing I should tell you about, the amount of money that I've spent traveling to talk about this, talking on the weekends to doctors on the phone, paying for meetings that I've set up, hiring a web firm, firing a web firm, hiring a new one, redoing the website several times with new information. I could have recertified 3 or 4 times with the amount of money that I spent on this. This is not about the money, this is about the principle, and only about the principle of this issue, because it's wrong. So we had this meeting, about 80 doctors showed up, and on the panel were myself, Marcy Zwelling, I'm not sure, I haven't seen her, but she was on the panel, and the physician who was the head of Los Angeles County Medical Association, who really had no idea what any of this stuff was about, but he was interested. He was in his 60s, retired rehab and physical medicine doctor, but hey, if this affects young physicians, well, then it interests me. So he came, and I also started to learn about people's different agendas. My agenda in all of this is just not to have to do this anymore. Other people have other agendas, political aspirations, membership aspirations, and money and things like that, which that's just not what I'm interested in. It seemed very clear from talking to these people and the recommendations, at least that the Los Angeles County Medical Association president made. They were very interested in getting involved, but only if young physicians would join the organization for several $100s. After which time, and I didn't really, again, I'm not very political, so I had to learn these terms, after which time the Los Angeles County Medical Association would draft a resolution, that they would then pass that up to the California Medical Association, that would either reject it, amend it, or adopt it, and then they would pass that on up to the AMA, where we would hopefully find a very eager beaver legislator to kind of push this stuff through. And so I'm listening to all this stuff, and I'm thinking, great, all the various avenues, but it just seemed, like a very labor-intensive thing. And my feeling, what do kids do these days? They make a website. What do? They send it to their friends, and then it proliferates, and then before you know it, it's a viral website, and I'll send it to 100 people, and so on and so forth. And like the Egyptians did with Twitter and Facebook, we'll bring down our boards like they did. But again, my naivete, the apathy, the cowardice, even my friends who said, hey, just let me know when that website's up, I'll give you some money for it and I'll come to those meetings. My very best friends couldn't find the time to do this. But the meeting came and went, and in January of 2010, I came back into the office after the holidays. I opened my door, there was a manila envelope under my door. I assumed it was a Halter report. I turned on my computer. I started to go through my mail. I opened up the Halter report, and in fact, I had a deep throat. Someone had prepared for me resolutions which have been drafted, which had been presented and adopted at the AMA House of Delegates meeting. So somebody knew that all of this stuff had already been going on, didn't want to identify himself. He later did identify himself, a grandfathered infectious disease doctor who felt that this was just wrong. But he gave me valuable information, so I started reading these things and I started to research them. And I Googled, you know, like, who's writing all this stuff? And it just kept saying the same people, the AMAYPS. And I had no idea what it meant. Called one of my gynecological colleagues who's very politically active, and he says, Ron, the AMA is composed of different sections. The YPS is the Young Physician section. They are responsible for protecting the rights and interests of physicians who have been in practice less than 8 years and who are younger than 40. So I didn't qualify for either of those two things, but I found them online. I found who the chair was, a physician by the name of Don Buckingham, Jules's gal pal. And I left her a very cryptic message about what I'd been doing and what I had done so far. And she called me back the next day, which happened to be a Saturday, and we talked on the phone for 3 hours. And she was like, Ron, where have you been all my life? You don't understand what we're up against. It's a room filled with doctors that only see dollar signs and they don't care about us. How can I help? And so we started to collaborate, and the ABIM, which we did invite to the meeting in December, said they couldn't get it together to come, and at first they really thought we were just bluffing. And when we followed up, or at least the PR people of this young physician group followed up with them, they got a little bit concerned. They're like, what? You actually had a meeting about this? Who's organizing this? Blah, 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 blah. And so they demanded, they insisted that they would be invited to the next meeting, so we said we'd let you know. And so we ended up having another meeting in March of 2010, a little bit smaller, and they sent the chair-elect of the ABIM, who proceeded to, you know, do his PowerPoint presentation with bar graphs and pie charts on why we need to do this. And one of the doctors unplugged his machine, and we proceeded to basically verbally annihilate this guy because he really didn't have a leg to stand on. We're on the right side of this issue. There is no reason for this. There is no statistical evidence that shows this maintenance of certification makes any of us better physicians. There's no statistical evidence that says it improves patient care or patient safety. This is nothing else than a money-making machine for our non-profit boards. So we had this meeting. The ABIM followed it up with a bunch of emails to me and various other doctors who were involved at it with basically stuff they wanted us to read. And lo and behold, a week later, unrelated to anything, any of my efforts, the New England Journal of Medicine editor-in-chief wrote a paper called Reconsidering Certification, and there were position papers for and against it. And you can find it under the anti-MOC articles if you scroll all the way to the bottom. That's really the first thing that was written about it, and it was shocking to me that the editor of the New England Journal of Medicine was questioning this. So I'm not alone. I'm not the only person that thinks this. And all of a sudden, it had like real validation with the New England. And so the two position papers, one for and one against, unfortunately, were only about those physicians who were grandfathered. You know, you're grandfathered, but should you do it? Should you pay the money and do it? And there was one group that said, yes, of course, and the other group that said no. And the doctors that wrote the no, you shouldn't, were the Dean of Harvard and the Dean of Columbia. So I read this thing with disbelief, and I, picked up the phone and I dialed the Dean of Harvard and the Dean of Columbia and the editor-in-chief of the New England Journal of Medicine, and they thought they were rock stars. Like, no one has ever called us before when we wrote an article. And so I told them about what we were doing, or what I had been doing primarily at the time, and they're like, how can we help? And so the editor-in-chief said, write me a letter. So again, I pulled out the 9-page manifesto of hate, and I whittled it down to a pristine, perfect 1,200-word document that had all of the injustices, all the finances of it all, and I submitted it to him, and he called me a little bit later in the day, and he says, I can't print this. And I go, how come? And he said, well, it's 1,200 words. The requirements for a letter to the editor are 120 words. And I didn't know. And so he says, knock it down to 400 and I'll look at it again. And so I, painfully started whittling this thing down, all while I had used the 9-page manifesto of hate as the template for the information, albeit not angry. And I started to draft content to make this website and hired a firm. And so for about 3 months it took to do this, the first version of this website. And for those 3 months, the New England Journal of Medicine editor literally whittled my 1,200-word document to a toothless couple of paragraphs. And I really thought he was stringing me along, and I started to become increasingly paranoid about it, actually. Why is it taking so long? How long does it take? He's just say yes or no if you're not going to print it, but why keep, squeezing every little last word out of it and taking every, tooth? He really defanged it. And I was doing this, and I'm thinking, oh man, something's going to happen. Drenching night sweats, deep depression and anxiety about it, because I'm like, how come I'm the only person fighting this? This is outrageous. Why aren't doctors getting their heads out of the sand and doing something about this? So 3 months later, he agreed to publish this letter. He agreed to publish it with the website in the letter. And in June of 2010, the letter came out in the New England Journal with this website, and that's really when things started to happen, and I started to get a lot of emails on this site. I got a lot of phone calls in the office, and I see a lot of familiar faces here, and really my first true ally that, talked me off the ledge a few times with this is sitting here, and he sent me a letter, and it was addressed to Obi-Wan Kenobi. And it said, feel the Force, Luke Skywalker, and there was a check for $2,500. And it wasn't about the money, but it was about what that meant to me. And that gentleman, that physician, that allergist and immunologist from Cadillac, Michigan is sitting here. And Martin Dubrovik, please stand up and say hello. And he was really the first to extend that hand, and we really became buddies. And this is, 2 years ago, and we had this online relationship. And we literally met last month in Washington, D.C., where I was invited to basically do the same for the Doctors for Patient Care annual convention. Excuse me. And I was invited to present this with Paul Kempen, who I will introduce you to in a moment, because I'm not really Obi-Wan Kenobi, to extend the Star Wars analogy. The real Obi-Wan Kenobi here is Dr. Paul Kempen, and not because he looks like Alec Guinness, but it's because he is passionate and knowledgeable and is an endless source of valuable information and very level-headed about all of this. And I think maybe the only thing I am in this movement is the Force. And throughout all of this, I'm going to have Paul come up in a little bit and talk. So after the website launched, I had another secret champion, the what do you call it? Who runs the hospital? What's that called? Not the CEO, but the chairman, whatever it is, chief of staff. Chief of staff called me, said, hey, I read your thing in the New England Journal. I've been reading the essays you've been writing. I'd like you to come and talk to us about whether or not recertification should be a requirement for attending privileges. And I said, sure. So I walk into a room. I don't know how many of you saw that, the second Batman movie where Morgan Freeman fires Rutger Hauer, and it's this big table with all these executives sitting around. So I walk into this white coat, situation, and I'm, very casually dressed in my Prada outfit for work, and I walk in, and the moment I open my mouth, I come under attack by my, the chairman of the Department of Medicine, my old program director, all of these people who were my attendings, trying to shoot me down before I had even opened my mouth. And before all of this, I'd read. I'd become an expert in all of this stuff. So I was able to shoot them all down. And in the end, my hospital decided, at least for the time being, that maintaining one's certification is not a requirement for maintaining one's staff privileges. Obviously, there are a lot of other things that you have to do. And I encourage you all to make a plea to your hospital. It's one thing, to be board certified and to, fulfill all these teaching or whatever other criteria they have, but they're really like country clubs. I mean, whatever the rules are, those are the rules to be part of the country club. And so I made my plea, and my hospital agreed with me, and for the time being anyway, that's not part of the plan. And while I mentioned earlier that doctors are very apathetic and cowardly about this, doctors are not stupid, though. And so when I had the letter published with the website, I realized one day somebody from the board is going to call me. And by the board, I mean the Board of Internal Medicine. And I'm not exaggerating to you when I say countless months of sleepless nights and drenching night sweats about this. And one day I'm seeing patients, and one of my receptionist interrupt me and she says, "Dr. B, there's a Dr. Christine Cassell on the phone from the American Board of Internal Medicine in Pennsylvania." And so I excuse the patient and I walk to my phone, and I've had this conversation already 50,000 times in my mind. So I get on the phone, and I was very disarming and charming about the whole thing. I was like, "Dr. Cassell, I'm so glad you called me. I was literally in the process of writing you a letter extending the proverbial olive branch," which I really was not. And we just, I slayed her with humor and charm and knowledge, and I have to be honest, she did not disagree with anything. I said, "Should I really have to join the American College of Physicians for $980 to get the answers? Isn't this supposed, if this is really about educating doctors and teaching doctors, shouldn't you just give us the answers if we don't get something right so we can read about it?" "Ron, I completely agree with you. Ron, is it okay if I call you Ron?" It was this kind of thing with her. And about 25 minutes into the conversation, I had to go back to my patient because I said, once again, "Dr. Cassell, recertification is taking time away from patient care." "Well, Ron, I would really like to have a follow-up conversation." And sure, she got my email. She sent me all kinds of nonsense that the ABIM had sponsored and written about. Really had nothing to do with being board certified, let alone board recertified. We had a follow-up conversation about 3 weeks later. It was a very different tone. "Ron, you need to understand that you've entered a political environment. Ron, you need to understand that they're third parties that want this. Ron, 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 Ron." And it just didn't end well. But what did end well was the outpouring and the number of allies and colleagues that I have obtained across the nation from different specialties that are really in support of this. And this is really one of the reasons I'm invited here, and I've made some very good friends. Martin is one of them. There are 3 other people here that have been very helpful, not just from an emotional standpoint, but also they have been prolific in their emailing and their writings to journals. And there are 2 that just wrote in the most recent issue of the AAPS, 2 tag team knockout 1-2 punch stories about this. Obi-Wan Kenobi, Paul Kempen, who I mentioned earlier. Please stand, Paul. And also Ken Chrisman, who I met in January of this year when I was first invited to meet the board of the AAPS, because just like Dr. Cassell called me, I got another interruption one day. "Dr. B, there's a Dr. Eck calling you from the AAPS." And oh gosh, what have I done now? And so I get on the phone, and this lovely woman says, "I've been following your website. I've been reading what you've been writing. How would you like to come and talk to us in January and talk to the board about what you've been doing?" So this has really been a nice experience to get to know everyone from the AAPS. Ken, who didn't stand, really should stand. He's been instrumental. And he has been his own kind of juggernaut with fighting maintenance of licensure, which the powers that be are trying to tie this MOC into MOL, which would be the third part of my concern on my drive back from taking my test 8 years ago. If they do that, it's game over. You know, we have our requirements, at least for me in California, it's 50 hours every 2 years and maintaining in good standing. I check those 2 boxes off. I send a check to the state of California, and a few weeks later I get my updated license. What they're planning on doing is changing this maintenance of certification into C, continuous maintenance of certification, turning it into an every 2-year cycle to link it directly with licensure. And the people that are responsible for licensure are the AAPS, the Grand Poobah board over which all the boards that we're diplomats of rule, and the FSMB. And Ken has been at the forefront with Paul fighting at the legislative level in Ohio, and Paul and Ken's message to everyone is really to contact your state legislator, talk to them about this, educate them about it, write letters, because it's not going to happen without us taking care of it. Very quickly about this website, the board's tax returns. I encourage you to look at it, go to your board, see how much money they are making. Collectively, our boards have over $400 million in the bank. They have secretly and quietly snuck MOC into Obamacare. Now it's called the MOC incentive program. So if I pay my board several $1,000s to jump through this hoop, I then qualify for the MOC incentive program, which will then pay me 0.5% more per Medicare patient that I see. You've already talked about Medicare slashes and cuts. Well, guess what? The collective several $1,000s we all pay our boards makes them hundreds of millions. The 0.5% that the Medicare is going to pay us doctors who still see Medicare patients is going to cost Medicare millions upon millions of dollars. But the real irony or tragedy or stupidity or whatever the right adjective is, that 0.5% doesn't even cover my costs of MOC. This is all about money. And before I run out of time, and I know I've spoken long and everyone's getting hungry and restless, there's one other guy here who really has stepped up to the plate since the January meeting that I was invited to, and he is a pediatric neurologist from Oklahoma, and Martin's from Cadillac, Michigan, Paul is from Ohio, as is Ken, and David Siegler, if he could stand up, has been tremendous with ideas and friendship. And I met him for the first time last night. We had dinner, and it's very nice to find like-minded physicians who are interested and passionate about this issue. And Martin has taken it to a whole new level, because really, what are our options here? My feeling has always been spread the word, mass non-compliance. Just don't do it. What are our boards going to do? Just don't do it. If we don't do it, who's going to practice medicine? Are our bureaucratic ivory tower politician physicians going to, you know, leave their $800,000 posts at the American Board of Internal Medicine? Is Christine Cassell going to take care of my patients? I don't think so. So one option is mass non-compliance. Another option, and I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know the definition of antitrust and class action and racketeering and restraint of trade and monopolies, but I think this falls under that, because these guys are slowly becoming the only show in town, and many have suggested suing them. And then the third option, what do we do in America? We compete. Provide an alternative. Perhaps one way would be to create an alternative certifying entity where this group could perhaps adopt the diplomat certificates, whether it's lifelong or time limited as mine is, regardless of the subspecialty, and for a very small cost, and CME, which could be offered through that organization. Just do your CME, remain in good standing, and we'll maintain that certificate. And Martin has spent a great deal of time and a great deal of money creating his own alternative board, and he has a full-time practice. He's a father and a husband, and he is happy to show anyone who's interested in doing such a thing for their specialty his model, because it's I've looked at it, it makes a lot of sense, but I think in the end, what makes the most sense is a large group of physicians, the membership of the AAPS, a large group of physicians, Doctors for Patient Care, other large physician groups, to band together. This is really, has no politics involved here. This is an issue we can all band together on and perhaps unify, and with a powerful, hand, give it to the boards and just say, we're not standing for this anymore. That's the end of what I have to say. If people have questions, I can answer them. Paul can answer them. Ken, David, Martin, yes. Ma'am.
I say don't reform the current process, get rid of it. If a lawyer doesn't do it, a doctor shouldn't do it. They taking the bar exams all the time? No. So, forget about it.
That's a very good point.
I already told the Board of Dermatology. They sent me a thing. I recertified once. They sent me a thing saying, oh, you were inadvertently not enrolled in the maintenance of certification program. Oh, you won't have to do the stuff that's already gone, but here's what you blah, blah, blah. And I just said, not going to do it.
Yeah. Well, it's a very, more power to you. Let's be very honest. Every licensed profession has continuing education requirements, whether it's a lawyer, a doctor, an engineer, an architect. Why do we have to do more? Lawyers, if they had to rebar every 10 years, they would sue.
Hey, Ron, Mac, how you, Ron? Where can we get a copy of your nine-page letter of hate? Because if it was such a good recruiting tool, I would love to have something like that I could forward to many people. I think it'd be
it's on here in various forms.
Okay, I was just looking through your website and I just couldn't find anything like that.
Part of it is the it's either in mission, part of it is home, part of it is in many of the letters I've written. You have to understand, a lot of people here, particularly Paul and Martin, have been prolific in their journal writing. Martin wrote one of the time-tested litmus, whatever the cliche is, litmus test articles, and it was published in the AAPS journal called MOC, A Malignant Growth. Dr. Huntoon actually was very helpful with me earlier. Martin connected me with Dr. Huntoon, helped me with editing some of my letters and essays that I got into various journals. There's a lot of stuff to read here. It's not, like you can do it on an airplane ride. It's going to take some time to go through it. But the most revealing part of this is, and there was a vote that I closed after about a year and a half because it just got, it's too much working and dealing with all of this because it's just me, or at least it was me at the beginning. It's unanimous. I mean, it's just, nobody wants this. The only people that want this are the doctors making money from this. Some doctors like the idea of it because they like to have some kind of measure of continued excellence, but I feel very strongly that when you finish your residency and or your fellowship, you take this board examination, it's a feather in your cap, it shows that you've accomplished this task. Where did it say ever that we would have to continue doing this? Every patient that I see is a recertification examination. Not one patient. The only validation of that I need is that they continue to see me and they refer their loved ones or friends or family, whatever. And no one's ever come into my office, can I see that you have been recertified, and where's the one that says that you were recertified? It's preposterous. And the new stuff that they've added, peer and patient reviews, I mean, those basically amount to wasting time, or it's just busy work when we should be busy doing work, because who are you going to ask to review you? Somebody you work with and refer to, or somebody that you don't? I mean, it's preposterous. And these practice improvement modules in my free time when I'm not practicing medicine and living my life, or maybe studying for this secure examination, I'm supposed to pull 100 charts on my diabetic patients and review my hemoglobin A1C management, and then I'm supposed to submit that information to the ABIM, and through their magical computer, beep, boop, beep, boop, beep, they send me in my practice improvement module how I'm doing compared to the rest of the doctors, and then I have to follow up on that and show them how I've improved stuff. Who has the time for any of this? Any other questions?
What this is it's more of a national obsessive compulsive satisfied, restless entrepreneurs. They come here, what they do, they got married, they've enriched the gene pool in obsessive compulsive genes, and this is, you know, we're going to do more.
Yeah, well, they're snowing the public, and they're snowing the hospitals, and they're snowing the insurance companies to tell us that this is what people want. Nobody wants this. They don't even know about this. Ken?
Ron is a giant, and I want you to know that AAPS is taking this matter extremely seriously. Now, there are two different issues. One is the MOC, the maintenance of certification. The other is the maintenance of licensure, which has not taken effect yet. But they want to make Ohio a pilot state along with several other states. We have taken this as model legislation to the American Legislative Exchange Council. We have a copy of that model legislation in the journal that just was passed out. What each of us can do and should do right away is to contact our state legislators, because this is a state issue. And if the FSMB, the Federation of State Medical Boards, sees this popping up all over the country in different state legislatures, they're going to take notice. And this is what each one of us has to do in our individual states, to contact our state legislators, get this model legislation into their hands so that they can introduce it and get this thing going in multiple states around the country.
Thanks, Ken. And you can read under the MOL area there, section, Dr. Orient wrote a white paper about this stuff, and you all should be getting the journal from the AAPS. These two articles are critical. Paul?
I think the other thing that's most important is this is going to get pushed. They're a multi-million-dollar industry. They sold us the USMLE 1, 2, and 3. Now they're going to have USMLE 4 for everyone for the rest of your careers. And we need to go to the state legislators. We need to go into our state medical boards. The state medical board works for me. I've been getting freedom of information out of these guys. I hope to present it all to you. If you have questions, come to me. They work for you. You go in there and you find the data and you throw it in their face. There is no competency issue with physicians. I surveyed 2011 all the cases presented before the Ohio State Medical Board, and it is representative of the nation. There was one physician out of 4,000 complaints who was actioned against for competency issues. The overriding problems that people have that get action is they're either sleeping with their patients, doing Medicare fraud, or doing drugs, or prescribing drugs inappropriately, or alcoholics. It is not a medical competency issue. This business addresses nothing for anyone, and so you need to go to your states, go to your state boards, freedom of information, get their own data and throw it in their face. And they won't love you, but they can't really do anything about it. But you can do something about this, but it takes at least 2 people in every state. And Ken and I have worked together, and I think we're going to stop this in the next few months. We're working very hard. If you have questions on how to do it, or the mechanics to do that, I'm certainly available at any time.
Go ahead. We have a question in the back there.
I just wanted to share some experience. I don't want to take away from everything else that's going on, so this might not be the forum because Is it on? Anyway, I have done both research and maintenance. So my point would be with research that I was a compliant doctor and I did everything I should. And then ironically, and I practice in California, I received within 2 months of completing my research I suppose it was just a random survey that required me to remit all my CME credits. You know how you get those random little notes. I've never gotten one before. I thought, oh, this would be very easy. I just done my research and I forwarded that to where I needed to forward it to California board. And I got a reply back that said that wasn't suitable. I needed to actually remit my individual hours. And so I called up there. I said, well, my understanding is when you research, that's a suitable, it meets requirement. And the lady on the other end said, oh, no, I've never ever heard of that. And you're in violation if you don't remit all your CME credits. I said, is there anybody else I can talk to? And she said, no, and it was the person who'd signed the letter, the big boss. So I luckily had scrambled and done, CMEs in the meantime and got it remitted. But in my quest for justice, if you will, I went to my local AAP chapter, my national AAP chapter, and nobody could help. Nobody was interested. So I called AMA, and said, you know, this just isn't right that the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing. And the AMA basically was not interested in talking to me because I was no longer a member, was told that they get whiny doctors every day talking about different issues that they had. And if they really needed, I said, well, can anyone at least talk to me and just tell me how to, you know, protest or orchestrate this? And they said the only thing they could have done is if I was already a member and been part of their CME, I'm not quite sure because I don't belong, their CME acquisition.
Yeah, it's outrageous, and they don't care.
That they would have been able to help me, but at this point there was nothing they could do for me, and good luck. So anyway, I closed that chapter and moved on, and then I got, how many years later, this MOC?
Right.
Okay, all right, compliant physician. So I sit down to do it right away. I'm the first generation that's doing it. I'm lucky, we're the guinea pigs. And so I'm starting to do it, and I'm okay on the computer, but not great on the computer, so they have a really poorly written website. I don't know if any of you have had to do the AAP MOC with Phase 4, et cetera.
Right.
So I got my husband, my first eye-tech guy, you know, and he's rolling his eyes thinking that, well, you know, what was it, the PhD? Yeah. So just push here, doctor. So he sat down and looked at me and said, this is the worst site ever. And he's really quite good on computers. So we waited till Monday to call the people at the board about this whole website, and they didn't even know how to work the website. Okay.
Yeah, well,
so,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm getting the sign that we have to end this because of the lunch.
The end point here is that I went to a conference where there was a board member there to answer all our questions who knew nothing about the website. His 40-minute presentation was just an advertisement for the American Board of Pediatrics. It initially was the beginnings of the conversations were polite. Then it became hostile when he saw that nobody in the room was open to this. And when you went up afterwards to talk to him, he was actually contentious, very contentious. And that was our board.
Yeah, well, your story is not unique, and like mine, I mean, the only thing that I did with my story was create this, but every doctor has this story, and there's not really one doctor that I've met that wants to do this. So we have to join forces, unify against this, and I would like to thank Dr. Huntoon, Dr. Orient, Dr. Eck, and Dr. Madrigal for inviting me to this lovely event, and I would also like to thank my three friends, Paul, David, and Martin, and also Ken, great to see you again, for supporting me in all of this and doing all that great work. So thank you all.
Good job.
Thanks so much.
Good job.